Awesome. So great. All right. So today's lesson, I'm really excited about it. We are going to be making a rub off or a copy of a pattern from your favorite pair of pants or jeans or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and get started on this pretty soon here. I wanted to just let you know that the same exact procedure can be used for both men's and women's, as well as children's wear. And when we get to drafting the back pattern, there is a very important step in here that most people don't do. And this is the most critical thing in getting a pair of pants to fit well in the backside area. So we are going to go ahead, I'm going to share that as we go through the back section. And additionally, I'm going to be using a method which I like to use whenever I'm creating a base pattern, and that is to basically build in the waistband and the yoke into the pattern. And that's part of the procedure that we're going to be doing. So great to see everyone, Texas, Pacific Northwest. Great to see you. All right, let's go ahead to go over the overhead. And I have a better camera set up. So let me know if you can see the overhead video. I'm gonna go ahead and move to this section, and we're gonna go through the materials and supplies. Okay, great. So let me know, is anybody gonna be doing this live with me, or are you just watching? Just let me know in the chat. Okay, so the tools and supplies that we're going to be needing for this are a hip curve, and I have a men's hip curve and a woman's hip curve, but for years and years I only had a woman's one, and I've used that for both men's and women's, and vice versa. They are interchangeable, they just have slightly different shapes to them. I also have my L square, which you can also just use a ruler, pencil, eraser, the pointed tracing wheel, which is really great, but it's not required, and I'll show you ways around it if you don't have one. We have pins, tape, and weights, tape measure, and a calculator as well. That's good to have on hand whenever we're drafting. So, oh great, Elova, you're gonna do it live. Julianne, you're doing it live too. Rhonda, awesome, so great. Okay, so since I am gonna be doing it in real time, it's not gonna be as quick as some other tutorials that are out there that kind of skip through things. So it will take a little bit of time, but it will be worth it because doing it in this way is definitely the best method, I think, of course. Okay, so we are going to, I did have my husband try on the pair of pants, and in the back we wanted to tighten it up a little bit. So I have pinned it in the back a little bit, and we're going to take that into consideration. Now, the amount that I pinned was for the full circumference. I didn't pin on both sides. If I had pinned on both sides, I would also consider that. But of course, that's just optional. I'm going to reach down and I'm going to pull out one leg, not both legs. One leg inside out, and then on the other leg, I'm going to be pulling that, pushing it through to the inside out leg. And we're going to get it as flat as possible. So we want to get those inseams to line up and the side seams to line up nicely. I also pinned the length for him because he also wants me to shorten these later. All right, so we have our pair of pants that we're going to be doing the rub off or clone. All right. And this has what's called a gusset. This is kind of a diamond shaped gusset. I'm going to act as if that does not exist because I would draft that later. So whenever we have a gusset, the gusset actually raises the rise a little bit. If we were to imagine that curve continue down, it would actually lower the rise a little bit. And because the gusset has to be on the fold here, it can't be curved here, it automatically raises the rise a little bit, which can help for clothes that are sports and functional clothing. Like these are a pair of hiking pants, and he often is climbing in pants like these as well. So I will be doing the gusset later on as well. Okay, So just checking in. All right. So we are going to start by actually drafting the front first. So I have it nice and flat. I like to just check it before I flip it over. And I like to pay attention to any top stitching, because you can see that top stitching is actually changing that fold of that seam a little bit here. And if you have a pair of like flat felled seams, like jeans or something, it can, you just need to decide on which side you're going to be tracing on, whether it's on the front side or on the back side, and just note that for when you get to the other side. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lie that flat on the table and have enough room on the sides here so that I can add seam allowances later on. All right, so one way to do it is to use the tracing wheel. As long as your fabric doesn't mind pinholes, then it's fine to use. If it punctures, then you don't want to use it. So an example of this would be going directly through that seam when it's totally flat on there. So that would be one way. And I actually forgot a step already. So I usually place the weights inside. And we want it kind of so that we can move out the side seam and move the inseam as needed, but we want the rest of the leg to stay as flat as possible. So I'm just going to kind of put these in there. All right. So now we can see that we're pretty good there. This fabric does have some stretch, so I have to make sure I'm not stretching it at all. And I can see that that traced line is actually pretty good. So I could continue with the pointed tracing wheel, or if you don't have one, we can also just mark it with the pencil. And actually I might go ahead and use the markers so that you can see it better when we take it off. It's not going to look as pretty, but we're basically just going down that seam all the way down. We want to make sure it's as flat as possible. And this area where we had that top stitching, we know that that's actually pulling it out a little bit more. So the top stitch is over here, and it's pulling it out more on the back panel in this case because the top stitching is on the back. Yep. So when I get to the back of that area, I'm going to have to add just a tiny bit to account for that top stitching because it's pulling the seam a little bit. Okay. And at the waistline, I'm going to just mark all the way to the top edge of my waist, including the waistband. And the reason why I like doing this is because this is basically then an exact replicate as a base pattern. And so in this case, it does get a little bit harder because we have the fly, and I forgot to actually close the fly. Usually I close it. Okay, and then I allow it to completely lie there. And this one, I should have actually done it on the side with this facing. That's generally easier, but I can also see where that zipper is, and I can feel that zipper and go right to the middle of that zipper. Okay, and in this case, since I have the gusset, I'm going to go ahead and continue the curve here. And I'm going to mark a little indication of where, actually it's right here, where that gusset begins. And I want to make sure I add a pin to the location on that gusset to indicate the front and the back. And this is a little bit hard because it can have a variance, but usually we have about 1/3 of that gusset width on the front and 2/3 on the back. So if I take that amount into thirds, it's right about here. And I'm going to mark as my gusset is for now, and then I'm going to check it later. I'm going to mark gusset. And then here, we want to continue it to the center of that gusset. And we can follow the line. And the tracing wheel really does save a bit of time as well when you're using that. Okay. So any pattern corrections like the length and the pinning, we'll do that at the end. All right, are there any questions so far? Okay. All right, so that's my front so far. And I want to do a quick check of that. Just lay that there. And you know what? That's not looking right to me because I went to the seam edge here instead of the waistband edge. That's why the drop was looking not quite right to me. So we're going to pull that down. And we have the fold here. Yeah, that's looking much nicer here. All right. So we can do a couple checks on the measurements, but we'll do that after. Actually, we could do it now. Did I mark the end? Did I mark this end? Other. Okay. Okay, actually we'll go ahead and do it now since the pattern is lying here and it's going to be really noisy when I move the paper around. So since I used this pattern piece, I'm going to be measuring that exactly for certain points of measure to double check it. So when we're measuring garments, we're usually using the bendable tape measure. We're going to measure that position from that gusset edge here across, and we are pretty close. So I haven't trued any lines yet, but we're good. If it was not looking quite right, I would reposition the pant and double check it. I'm going to check the waist at the very end, but maybe I might want to check kind of partially down, 7 to 8 inches down, which is 18 to 20 centimeters. And this one is definitely a hard one to do because of that fly. Okay, so 5, 8, 7. All right, we're looking really good. And then I would continue down by double checking the thigh. He wants the thigh bigger, so I'm definitely going to be making an adjustment there. So go 8, 7. Wait, did I do that right? 7. Okay, we'll go to 8. Okay, we're looking really good. So, of course, you can continue checking those measurements for the knee and the bottom opening, but I think we're good for that. Then we'll go to the back. Okay, are you guys still there? Can you still see and hear me okay? Just give me a yes in the chat. Let me know. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the back. So we're going to keep working on that same exact leg. All right, great to see you guys in the chat. Thank you. All right. Okay, so we'll go ahead and make sure it's totally lying flat. Do a double check over here, make sure it's not twisting or anything. And then we're going to place the back toward the paper. Okay, and with this one, it's always harder to do the back panel because it likes to move a little bit more because it's wider than the front panel down the entire leg. So the weights really help with this one. And I usually put a weight on each side as close to the seam as I can without getting that seam to move so much. Okay. All right. So usually I'll align one side first. So I'm going to pull it all the way to one side. And now I have that little bit of top stitch there. I'm going to look inside my pant and I'm going to see how much is that top stitch. What is it? It's an edge stitch here. So that's adding about a 1/16 of an inch, which is about 1.5 millimeters. So I need to make sure that I'm adding that to there. Okay. I know it's just a small amount, but it's little things like that can really add up, especially if you have top stitching throughout your entire garment. Okay. So with this step, we are going to act like the yoke and the waist don't exist at the moment. But we are going to be adding a dart in there to account for the shaping on the waist, and then we'll be closing that dart later on. I'm going to measure the amount that I pinned my waist tighter and note that amount down. Take that out. And this is the part that most people skip. Most people skip the adding the dart in to consider the yoke and the shaping in the back area. If you don't add the dart in and close it out, you're not going to get the right shaping of that back yoke. So I'm going to move this down so you can see a little better. Okay, so we're going to start with the side seam. We're going to add that little bit that we needed from that little top stitch. Actually, it's a little bit further out. And of course, you can always measure, but as I know a lot of people are just watching right now and not doing it live, I don't want to bore you with too many measurements. Okay. All right, so now that we've got this side done, we need to carefully allow it to come over. So we need to hold the center of the leg and slide it over. Get those weights over till we have it all the way over to the other seam, the inseam. And when you do this, you can do a couple checks over here that the amount that you've moved over is the same amount that you've marked here. So we're looking pretty good here. From that seam to the mark. So this shifted just a little bit. Going to pull it down toward that line so this distance is the same. That's looking good. And this should have a slight bit more. Yep. Okay. Then we're going to do the back. So this, we're going to trace it as it is for now, and then we're going to add the dart in. And this is then, once you have the dart in there, that's a base pattern. Base patterns always have darts in the back of pants. If you don't have a dart back there, you're going to get gaping on the waist. And if you don't properly close the dart, you'll also get gaping. Okay, the biggest difference from men's to women's wear on the rise is that usually men's is more flat in the back area. Women's tends to be a little bit more curved. And I want to go all the way to my pin here, so we're really pulling the garment out. I'm going to mark my gusset here and the pin here. Okay, so it doesn't really want to be pulling that way. Okay, but it's a little bit trickier with those gussets in there. And of course, you should be using pencil, not marker. Okay, I'm going to just do a few checks here. Oh, I want to at least mark my yoke position. The waistband doesn't matter because we can do that later. Take out all of those weights. Oops, sorry if it's loud. All right. All right, somebody's asked a question. So basically you are tracing out the core leg pattern before doing any other pieces you would sew onto the garment pattern itself. Yes, exactly. So we're always doing that core pattern piece first, and then we're making any pattern pieces from it. So that could be a really great way to have a base pattern, change the yoke shaping as much as you want, change any pocket shapings. This has kind of standard shapes of pockets, and we would just do this to the pattern afterward. Of course, if you want to do it prior, you can, but I like to have my base, and then I like to design from the base and make changes. And someone also asked, is there a rule of thumb regarding how long a dart should be when adding one in? Yeah, so the rule is generally we want the dart, the point of the dart should end at the area where it protrudes the most, and that's anywhere on the body. So in the backside area, it's generally, when we look at the standard rise, it's generally in this area here is where the backside protrudes the most, which means usually we can have a dart that's somewhere around that. We kind of imagine where that backside is. So when you have a pair of pants on, you can always see where does the protrusion kind of peak, which is probably down here. And we want the dart to be up a little bit above the peak position. So there should be a distance from that. But yeah, it is going to vary based on the height of the person and the size. All right. So you are copying the side measurements that are lying directly on the paper. The side measurements. So I'm double checking the measurements that are on the paper. Yes. So the side of the pattern that was directly against the paper is the side that I'm double checking. So now I've done the back here. And we're going to do grain lines later. We don't deal with that right now. And then we're going to double check some measurements here. So I'm going to check that width. And it was a little bit tricky with that gusset in there. So I want to go from here. Pretty close. And then I would do another check of the hips. So we'll go maybe about 7.5 down. Since we haven't trued everything yet, meaning we haven't smoothed out the lines of our pattern piece, we can, it's not completely exact cross-checking. You can always redo that at the end to make sure that you're in line with the final measurements once you've trued the pattern. So those are good enough checks for now. The next thing I want to do is I want to check the waistband, and we're going to then add the dart in there for the back side. So we have our final measurement here of what we want to achieve, but we need to add the dart in there, which is going to make it bigger back here. So I'm going to do a quick check of the back, and I'll pull the pattern of the garment right side out. Because we always have this overlap in the waistband, not always, but most of the time. And we want to double check that to the center front where that zipper is. That's really the center front, is the middle of the zipper. And actually on this pair of pants we have kind of the two pants here, so we could also say that we could just go to that seam as well. So people do it differently. It's really variable here. So I'm going to mark my center back here. But for the waistband purposes, we'll see how this is. It's coming kind of right there at the seam edge. And I'm measuring the half waistband just for the half measurement. 15 and 7/8. I'm at 15 and 7/8. And that's what I want for my final measurement minus my ½ inch. So I want 15 and 3/8 minus the ½ inch because I pinned it on him before I did this. Oh no, that was total. So on the half, we would then go to about 15 and a half. I'd rather be a little bit more snug. So I'm going to check the back here. I'm at 8 and 5/8. So in centimeters, I know I'm not going to do both centimeters and inches this time because we're doing it live. But the concepts are the exact same. Okay, 7 1/4. All right, so then I would go ahead and do a quick calculation of those two and just see how I am compared to that amount. And 8.625, and I'm at the original amount, 15 and 7/8. So that's right on track with those two amounts. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that dart in. Okay, so the depth of the dart, usually when you're doing women's pants, this tends to be much more curved here, and so it's much easier to add a dart in on women's pants because most of it ends up going to that side seam and not as much to the center back seam. So when we're doing this, we're going to first check our lines and see how they're looking, as if we are going to start truing them up. And then I would go kind of straight from that hip going upward. So these definitely, men's pants are much straighter back here usually than women's. And I do want to add some to my thigh, especially at that gusset area, which was kind of here. So we can already see this is not a nice shape. And that's probably why he was feeling like it was so tight. So I would probably go here. And then looking at this is quite curved for a man. I would probably fill it in as well right here to give him a bit more, especially in the back thigh because the leg is moving upward when you're moving. Okay, so I would kind of true it up like this. And if you're doing women's wear, you're definitely going to have a much bigger straight up gap. And that's generally indicating, you can come in a little bit for women's, but that's generally indicating the dart depth that you need. Plus you can do a little bit here as well. So we're going to go straight up here. Go ahead and shrew this in. And I've added a little bit there as well, but that's okay. I'm going to wait to do the full truing until I get the front on top of it and double check the balance. Then I'm going to kind of repeat that same thing in the back. So we're going to be adding here to make it a little bit straighter in the back and give him that dart is going to give him the protruding area that he needs to move more comfortably and to not have it gaping in the back. And with the rises, I usually like using this hip curve more. And you can see we're going to kind of continue that downward motion even though the gusset was in there. We want to always have kind of closer to a 90-degree angle at the back when it's possible. But we'll true that once we look at the front as well. So that's, you know, getting into the 90. It's not going to be exact 90, but we'll check it when we get to the front. Okay, so where we kind of start adding is in that area of that dart, and I would say we would start with maybe a 5-inch dart or 5.5-inch dart, which in centimeters, that is between 13 to 14 centimeters. So I would start adding wherever the pattern looks like it's nice to add. So if we're adding even a little bit there, a little bit lower, that's okay, as long as we get a nice continuous curve back there. Then the location of where we add that dart is generally toward the center of that area. So we're at 9.5, and we'll go half of that, should be 4.5 3/4. So that's my center of my dart, and I'm going to go toward the angle of that backside. It doesn't have to be in line with any grain lines. It's generally toward the area that's protruding outward. Okay. I'm going to go with 5 there, because the lower you go beyond the yoke, the more we have to kind of make other adjustments, which we'll get to later. Then the depth that I want to add here, I was at 8 5/8 here originally, and I want to take out 1/4 inch because I pinned out the 1/2 inch on both sides. So 1/2 inch on one side, which means 1/4 inch on each side. So then here we're going to be going, our target is 8 3/8 target. All right. So we can go here, that was 3/8, and then we're going to add this much here. So we are at about 1 1/8 dart depth plus my 1/4 inch. So that's at about 1 3/8. So we want that split by 2. So we're going to go with 3/4. Okay, 5/8. Okay, so we're here and here. And then we're going to go down to 0 here. Okay, so that's pretty good for now. We're going to cross-check the front on top of it. Oh, and this is going to be tricky because you're not going to be able to see as well. Can you see through the pattern okay? Can you see bits and pieces? All right, I'll try to mark certain things so that you can see it. Okay. So we have here the back crotch position, and then we have aligned we want to align the back legs. And so this is then in the fitting book. At the beginning of the pants chapter, we're going to be checking the balance on 207. And we're going to also be marking in the grain lines once we know it's balanced. Then 209 actually shows you how to balance it if it's not balanced. So what we're looking for is we're looking to see how low the back crotch is compared to the front crotch. And if you have a really tight fitting pair of pants, you can have up to a 1 inch difference between the front and the back, but you don't want to have more than that. And if it's a looser pair of pants, you can get away with not having any. So if it's really like more of a pair of pants that really hangs down and isn't at all fitted, then you can go with much less. So, or 0 there. So what we're doing is we're going to be aligning kind of this and the crotch point, and then we're going to check the legs here. And we can see this is the front right here, and this is the back. So I have quite a difference. And I want to align this and then check and see how far off am I here, which I am quite far off. So when it's this different from the back to the front, and here, let me get a second ruler so you can see. We have from the front to the back, if we were to check that these two guidelines are parallel, 11 and 11. So we're aligning those crotch positions and then the side seams. So I can see the front is quite a bit lower, or on the side seam here, which means my back crotch depth is quite a bit lower. So it's at 3/4 of an inch. And I'd like to see it up a little bit higher for these pants because they're not overly fitted. So I'd like to have it a little bit higher up. And I can also see that when I align those side seams, if I pull them out here, aligning those side seams, checking that. Yeah, it's 3/4 of an inch, which is about 2 centimeters. And I think I'd like to see it up a little bit higher. So what we do to get this balanced then is we're going to be pivoting from this position, and we're pivoting this upward until we're getting closer to this. So you can see here, I am now about 3/8 of an inch, which I'm gonna leave a little bit of a depth there because they are pretty tight on him. And considering he's gonna be doing some climbing in them, I don't want him to be overly tight. So a little bit of room there. If these were loose though, I would definitely shorten that distance even up to 0 if they were really loose all the way down. Okay, so then you can see we have quite a big difference from the front to the back. And I know it's hard for you to see this probably, but we are going to rebalance the legs. So we want to take the halfway distance between the front here and we have the back here. Generally, we take the halfway distance unless it's really looking off to me, which it is. It's looking quite off. So in this case, I would probably go with really pulling the side seam out a little bit. Yeah. Okay. And this is kind of the hardest part to explain, but the book does a really great job. It took me a long time to write that part in the book, so reference the book if you're not quite catching on. So we're looking really good here. And then we want to take the middle point generally of now the back is over here because I slid it over. So you can ignore these purple lines. And here I want to shorten up the distance here. This is looking too wide here versus this is really narrow. So we want to shorten that up, which means we're going to take from the back and we're going to give to the front. So let's find that middle point between the front and the back, which is actually where that purple line is. It's pretty close. And we're going to true up that line then. So this is the front. We're taking the halfway point because we're giving and we're taking. Okay, so from here, pretty straight, really, really straight for a pair of pants. How much? So somebody was asking how much can you have different from the front to the back. On the tight pair of pants, you can have up to an inch, which is 2.5 centimeters. And usually even actually up here, I usually give a little bit more. So I would actually take the halfway point. When they're this different from the front to the back in this area, I would probably give a bit more. But since I'm straight on the back, we'll just keep it the way it is. So if you ever have a twisted inseam or really bad back drag lines that kind of go down like this, it can be because the difference is too big for your shapes. Okay, so I want to take the amount that I've taken off of the front here, and I want to give it to the front over here. So this amount, I'm going to give it over here. That's going to become my new line. This amount over here, I'm going to give it over here. And then that same amount, I'm going to be taking it from here to then reduce the gap between the two. So this, we can see the new line ends up looking like this. And then our new line over here is here, which is giving us a more balanced look. This is the back then, and then this is the front. They don't have to be the same distance between the front and the back, and more often than not, we have a much bigger distance in this area on the back panel. But a little bit closer than having such a big difference is helpful. Okay, so now we've trued up that seam, which is this one. I'll go ahead and mark it quickly here. And actually, now that I see these lines up here, I want to smooth this out a little bit. All right, so we would go ahead and true this one in as well. And I'm going to continue the curve of this down. This one's a little bit nicer here. And I'll go ahead and give a little bit in the thigh in the front, just because it was pretty snug. And of course, when you're using pencil, it looks so much prettier than this. And he actually did ask for the bottom to be a little bit smaller too. So maybe I'll take off a little bit off the inseam. And the reason why I'm taking it off the inseam is because when he's hiking or climbing, it's better to have it further away from the body than catching on the boots. Okay, so for the front rise here, we definitely want to have a little bit smoother of a line than what I copied here. And we want to smooth it in with this. So it could be that I end up taking a bit more off there. Okay, yeah, so that's taking off a little bit there, but then smoothing it out up here. So, yeah, that's not pretty. Okay, so this little bit here, I would do a double measurement check, and if it's not coming in right with my new line, I would definitely come out a little bit further. But I want to have a nice depth here for a man's pant instead of being too narrow. Otherwise, it's not going to feel good to him if it's too narrow in the depth. On a woman's pant, it can go more narrow there generally. Unless it's for a bigger person, then it's not as comfortable either. Okay. All right, are you guys still there? Are you enjoying this? Is it too much in depth or it's clicking for you? Let me know. Okay. All right, and actually when I do this, I usually then fold the crotches together, the inseams, and align them. Hanging in there. Okay, good. Good to see that. All right, so we want to go for a little while and see how that's looking. So we're definitely coming up to a point there, and that's not going to be so nice. So since this had the gusset in there, I'm going to go ahead and use another color. We're going to smooth that out. And even if you didn't have a gusset here, we should still either fill in some in here or take a little bit off so that it's nice and continuous. So I'll probably do a little bit of both here. I'll probably fill in a little bit here and take off a little bit. So that's going to be more accurate. Always Xing out if you're not erasing, but erasing is easier or better. Okay. Oh, and so what I forgot to do is a tracing wheel on top of this. So I took the halfway point, but I didn't trace it onto the back to get my position. So I'm looking to get that halfway point for this new line, and that looks really good. So I'm going to trace that new line onto my back. And this is exactly why all of my courses are pre-recorded, you guys, because those little things, if I forget to do that in the actual course when I'm teaching, I feel so bad. So everything's pre-recorded so that you get the best of the best, and then it's not, oh, I forgot to do this. So I go back in and I always edit those videos over and over again to make sure they're accurate. Okay. Then over here, we're going to take the 1/4 of an inch in to reduce it as he requested. Definitely want to get further out though for that knee Don't want to make it too narrow there. Okay, so that next thing is really aligning those front and backs of those side seams and shoring up the waist. Oh, why am I tracing the front line onto the back piece? Because I took the middle line of the front and the back. So I had the two on top of each other. And when I pivoted the pattern to get this higher here, I needed to rebalance this. So I took the middle point between the front and the back, and that's my new line. So I gave to my back and I took from my front, give and take. And that's why that becomes my new line for both the front and the back. So I traced that new line onto the back so that it gave me the amount needed on the back, and I took it from the front. So my original line was here on the front. Okay. Then the next thing, I would just do a quick double check of those green lines and see how it's looking. Okay. Go ahead and mark here and here. I had the 3/8 of an inch difference up here, so I'm checking for that. Checking this, and we're going to go exactly perpendicular to that is our green line here. Now I'll trace that as well through. If you don't have the tracing wheel, you can fold the paper back. Okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll double check that at the end. Okay, so I'm folding back the front side seam. And at this point, we can also measure that back side seam and the front side seam and compare the two, just to see where they're at. We're going to have to do that for sure at the end as well. Okay, but we'll do it now just to check. Okay, so this is, to this point, it's 41. All right, so we are going to continue to true the waistband, and for this it is easier usually when you tape the two pieces together. And we're going to true that waist. Okay. We want the front to be as close to a 90-degree angle as possible. It really should be true 90 degrees. so that it's not Ving, coming up to a V or dipping to a V. And then we want to close the back dart to true the back. And whether you have the depth of the dart toward the center back or towards the side seam, that's up to you. I'm going to do it towards the side seam. And as well, the back, we really want that to be 90 degrees. And this seems usually better this way. Okay. All right. I'm going to dip it this way for the upper portion. Alright, so this is my base pattern then. We true up the bottom hem and then that's it. Get the dart legs there. And if you don't have a tracing wheel for that, then you can just use pins as well. Through. Okay. So I've measured the side seam. I need to measure the inseam and compare those two. Okay, going from that new position on the rise. And to this line, I'm at 31 1/4. Okay, so I need to come down a little bit there. Right, true in the bottom. So what can happen sometimes when we've pivoted the pattern to rebalance it? Sometimes the bottom can be slightly angled, and usually if it has a slight angle to it compared to the grain line, I let it go. If it's a huge angle, then we need to do more shifting of giving and taking to get those legs more in line with each other. If they're not enough in line with each other, then we get really big angles. And we can have a slight bit of an angle is okay, but not a big amount. And for this example, let's see, yeah, we can always give and take as well from the front to the back to get differences if you do have differences, if you need to make them the same. Okay, so the front's looking really nice. All right, so that's my pattern. Now I need to make my yoke and my waistband and any sort of pockets or anything like that. Of course, I won't go through the whole pocket thing because that's easy, I hope. You measure the pattern and you measure the garment and then you place it on the pattern and mark it out that way. But I do want to go ahead and show you how to make the waistband, especially a curved waistband. Okay, so we are going to tape the back closed along that dart. Okay. And I marked my yoke here, and of course I have my waistband as well. So I'm going to measure that waistband height, and I'm going to mark that parallel down from the pair of pants pattern. So I want that same exact amount. That's my waistband. is my center back. This is my side seam. This is my center front and my side seam. Okay. So one thing that's really critical in this step is writing down those things, because if you start cutting them apart and you didn't write it down, it's hard to take those pieces back together and know where they came from. So we want to go ahead and draw in our back yoke, and I want that to be fairly straight for a man's pant. You can have more of a curve for women's. And I'm going to actually bring it down lower because this is actually not a very big gap here. And to utilize more of the dart, I want to lower it down closer to that point. Okay. Just know if you lower it down too much, those pockets keep moving down with it generally because the pockets are right below the yoke. So we don't want to go too low. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and cut those pieces apart. And generally you would true this first to make sure it's nice and smooth. But just for this, I'm going to take this as well. And then the yoke. Okay, so this is my yoke pattern. Make sure any of those other lines are erased, my original lines. And then I have to take this little amount out so that the yoke fits into here. And so you can see what we've done here is by closing the dart, we've shifted the dart to this area. So we're still getting the shaping we need for the protrusion of the back side, and it's going to give us a really nice fit. So we need to get that to fit in. So I would take, when it's this much, I would take off a little bit on the back and a little bit on the side seam usually. And usually I would take my clipper. Alright, so then we would walk the pattern along each other or measure it to just see if that's pretty close, and that's close. We would say this goes away, and then we need to true this in to make that nice and continuous. Okay, so I would go ahead and cut that off. And of course, if I wanted this as a base pattern, I would make a copy of the whole thing, keep it with that dart in there, because next time, what if I want a wider waistband, or I don't want a yoke and I want to change it to 2 darts, or have the dart in there for a pair of slacks or trousers, then you have more freedom when that dart's in there. For other options could be that you're having a curved yoke this way, and you're just drawing in the yoke shape that you want and closing that dart up. So over here we need to really connect those side seams. So you can see we have then our curved waistband. It looks a little bit strange here, so I would definitely double check that shape. I would cut it out and place it on him to see if that's looking good. It has a higher back because they are for climbing and hiking, so it's more normal than just a regular pair of pants to have a bit of a more higher back there because that allows, yeah, more shaping for the back leg. So are there questions? I think there are that I've forgotten to come to. All right. Yes. Okay. Let me see. Where are we? Will you address how to draft the pants that already have darts in them? So it's the same exact procedure. Let me go off this and come back to the questions here. So it's the same exact procedure about what we just did with darts, because as you can see, before this had a yoke in it, it started off with a dart. Every base pattern should have a dart in it if they're fitted. So if it would be like an elastic waistband or something like that, it goes straight up and it doesn't have shaping. It wouldn't necessarily have the dart, but your base pattern could still have the dart. It's just that you don't sew it in there. The elastic would take care of that shaping. So it's the exact same procedure as we just did, but you're keeping the dart instead of making it into a yoke at the end. Yeah. All right. Will I be releasing a recording? Yes. So the same thing will be going as the live replay. So it's the same exact link that you got in the email. And all right, you decided to stop doing it and just watch. It's definitely a process. Yeah, definitely a process. It is. And, you know, I've done probably hundreds of pairs of pants just working in the garment industry. So, you know, you would think that I would be better at probably teaching this live, but, you know, these things are so complex, and it really, that's one of the things I found in teaching. It takes so much. I have so much going on in there, and to be able to teach it, that's why I do all of the things pre-recorded, because I have to simplify the processes and see where it goes better in a different order and that type of thing. So I can definitely understand it's probably hard to follow, but come back to it and do the parts, and hopefully it makes more sense next time you watch it. What are the pens I'm using? I'm just using a regular marker, but you should not be using this. These are really just so that you can see them. What does help though is when you're using just a regular pencil, when you're going from the back to the front, you could definitely use a colored pencil, and that's at least erasable. But as you can see, my marks were getting really confusing, and so erasing is way better than marking and then not knowing which mark was correct. And even when I'm erasing, I often put an X through it, then I erase it. So then I even know I X'd it. It's not valid anymore. Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you. Rhonda, you said I did a great job. Love it. I think that's Lara. Nice to see you. I am going to try a pair of shorts. Yes, it works exactly the same way for shorts. So definitely a great thing. And, you know, the balancing for shorts, it's not going to be as big of an issue if you have a bigger difference from the front to the back when you get to the balancing part. On shorts, it doesn't show those really bad deep back drag lines unless they're really long shorts, then they would show. And a twisting inseam wouldn't show either on a pair of shorts. So you can almost forego that step if you're doing shorts and they're not really long shorts. It will still fit and it will feel comfortable. Yeah. All right. You're going to try, Yolanda. So glad to hear that. What is my favorite paper? And my tracing paper is much thinner. So this paper, where did I get it? I know I got it online somewhere. It is a craft paper, and actually my favorite paper to use is medical paper. You can buy the medical paper in the rolls, and if you have doctor friends, they can probably tell you where they get it from. I don't know if they would sell it to personal people, but I know you can buy that online, and that's a really nice thin paper. But this, I tend to like a thicker paper as long as I can see through it, and that's only because by the time you're folding and reutilizing the paper so much, it does get kind of worn after a while. But the tracing paper really is nice as well. So yeah, I don't know the weight of this. I would guess it's probably around a 75 grams, or that would be, you know, the paper scale in the US doesn't really make sense. It's maybe around 20 pounds in the US, but they weigh paper very differently for different types. So Rhonda, you're asking, when is my moulage course class? And all right, so you're having a difficulty with another method you tried, and you need your shoulder adjustment is off. Do I have a super trick? So my next moulage course is going to be in, I think, September, October. And if you haven't signed up for that yet, I'll put a link in the description below. There is usually a free mini course series that runs before that, which is super helpful. So definitely sign up for that if you haven't already. And do I have a shoulder adjustment? What is your exact problem? Maybe I can help you better if you tell me what is the problem in the shoulder area. Is it the width? Is it the back that feels too tight? Is it the shoulder seam position? Is it the shoulder slope? Maybe if you tell me, then I can maybe better help. Your shoulder seam sits back. So the issue with that is simply moving that shoulder seam. You just give and take. It's a super easy correction, just like we did with the pants here on the side seam and the inseam. We give and we take and we move it. So the actual angle of the slope, once it's correct and you don't have other fitting issues, you can move that seam as you want. It becomes actually more of a style detail in a sense. And of course, we can position it more towards the front if we have a more rotated forward shoulder. But the slope is, once it's determined, you can give and take and move it as you would like. Yeah. All right. Yes, Rhonda, Amazon sells medical paper. Yes, I think they do. And if you're lucky and they ship to you, that's wonderful. Switzerland, they don't ship here. Oh, baking paper. Yes, Lara, that is you. I know you use baking paper. I love that. Such a great idea. All right. So I missed a couple questions. Is it best to remove the elastic from the waistband before tracing a pair of shorts or pants? No, you don't have to. And the biggest thing here is placing a weight on, like, in the middle, and then placing a weight towards one side that's been stretched a little bit, and then really you need the center weighted down the most, and then you can kind of stretch and pull as needed to get that elastic to stretch on each side. So the middle is the most important, as long as that's staying in place, and you can even place your hand there. And then quickly double check it that it's not moving too much on you. And then afterwards, you can stretch the full amount to see. Basically, you want to stretch it until the wrinkles of the fabric disappear. If you're stretching beyond that because the fabric stretches, that's too much. So you want to just really get the pattern of the fabric. Yeah. All right. Okay, so yes, Rhonda, you're welcome. I'm glad that was helpful. Okay, next question. I am sure in the front crotch, every pair of pants has lots of extra fabric in the front. Can that be changed? So let me get a drink of water, sorry. Yeah, let me quickly go to the overhead shot quickly. And in the fitting book, okay, to see where it's at. Where is it? It's after this. Okay, one thing that you want to do here is you want to double check the width of your thigh, literally the side width. And what I like to do is I like to put a ruler, let's say a ruler here and a ruler here, and then a ruler in between. So it also works really nicely with an L-square, which we actually didn't even use in here. You can put the L-square through your thighs and then get the width here and then measure that distance. You want to measure the width of your thigh from the profile, and then you want to compare that to your pattern. More than likely you're too wide here, and you can reduce it by taking it off here. Additionally, what you probably need beyond that would be taking it off even more here. So you're reducing the front and probably the back as well in the same concept. So when your two pattern pieces are together like this, and you have the inseams aligned, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more. Sorry, okay. So when those inseams are aligned, the width here should be the same width as your thigh, more or less. You can have a little bit of differences based on the types of fabrics you used, but that's a good starting point. So in this example we gave, but in the next example would be then that you're taking, I guess, from this one. All right, so that's similarly, like it might look like this. That might be your issue, and you can pin it like that. So that's page 217 and 219. So yeah, hopefully that didn't get totally cut off with the view of the camera. All right. So Jackie, you asked, am I going to make up the trousers I have copied? Yes. So this is going to be a birthday gift for my husband. So I will be sewing them up in, his birthday is coming up. So in the next week or so, I'll be sewing them up. Yeah. All right. Okay. Are there any other questions? I hope you've enjoyed this. I can continue to do the front pocket detail. If anybody wants to stay on for that, let me know and I'll continue on. But that's just optional. So if you guys have had enough, then that's okay. But since I have to do it anyways, for a birthday gift, then I'll keep going. If anyone wants to stay on, let me know. All right. And I've really appreciated everyone to join. It's really so much fun to see you. Okay, great. Okay, yes. So there are a few people willing to stay on, so we'll keep going. Let's switch back to the overhead. All right. Oh, Tracy, it's great to see you. Okay, we're going to refocus, make sure we're good. Okay, so the front pants. Here. So the front pants here, we would have to still do a few pattern pieces. We have to do the fly, which usually I just cut out. I don't actually make a pattern piece unless it's, of course, for production, then I would have to. But something like this, I would just lay it on here, and actually since we have our waistband already cut off, we can just mark those directly there. Of course, we could measure, and that would be more accurate, but since I'm probably going to change it slightly anyways, or we can also use that tracing wheel through this. This fabric doesn't mind it, and I can really get the shape exact if I want to. Okay, all right. So usually over here, we would definitely have a facing on the inside. So this facing is generally going here. We can see that this is just a big, oh, it's actually rounded on the inside. It has no full, it's just a fold that has no seam there. Usually how I do my facings is I have it kind of curved to the outer pocket here. So I go about 1.25 inches, which is about 3 centimeters beyond here. And this is going to be, actually I'll go to 1.5 inches, which is about 3.5 centimeters, just to make sure it's clear. So we don't want to make any fabric showing up. So this is going to be my facing line, which is this pattern piece here. And we can see we're getting pretty close to this here. So definitely would need to clear that completely. So we don't want to get in the width of the fly. It's going to get in the way. So I could probably just measure this out. That's 2 inches. So that's 5 centimeters for this kind of width here. So, oops. So I am marking my fly anyways, so that you can see. Length of a zipper minimum should be about 5 inches, which in centimeters, I think that's 10, no, that's 12.5 centimeters usually. This one's slightly shorter, so yeah, the fly is much longer, but the actual zipper opening is not very long for a men's pant. So, and even women's, usually we're about 5 there. Okay, so I'm going to say that's my bottom of my zipper. And I'm going to go beyond that 1/2 inch, which is 1.3 centimeters. Okay. All right, so that's my fly here, and we curve it. So that would be the J side. And then this would then be nothing here, and then I would kind of fold that back. So, or not fold it, I would cut it out basically. So we could definitely continue this on, but we would just have to cut it in sewing probably. And then we would have our pocket bag here. So maybe I'll do that in another color. And pocket bag depth is really important, especially on people who are active. We don't want those cell phones falling out. And so you can just measure the depth, but I'm just feeling for it. And you can always double check that as well. So something like this, we could kind of curve it up, and then it could go into the fly, and it would kind of go up like that, or we could go straight up into the waistband as well. So that's up to you. And if we can kind of imagine that hand, actually I would probably want something a little bit more like that. And then kind of curving up, meeting that. So this would be then my pocket bag shape here. Okay, so this piece I would trace off onto a new piece of paper, and it would be this entire piece here. Oh, from here on. So okay, and of course you should use rulers to make it quicker, but since this is probably just only going to get made maybe 2 or 3 times for my husband, it doesn't have to be exact, but don't tell him I said that. Okay, then we also have the back pockets, and here we want to kind of imagine that back pocket, and the position is definitely going to be as high as possible since I made that yoke even wider. So I would definitely just measure this off. And I just wanted to check to see where it looks like in relation to the crotch. If it was going much lower, I would definitely reconsider that, making that yoke much wider. But since I have space here and a gap, it's okay as it is. So we're at 5 5/8, and down here 5 1/2. So these are standard pocket measurements here, really standard, 5 1/2. Yeah. So this, let's see, if I have any more paper. Yeah, I mean, that's basically just drafting it out. I would actually probably not even draft that out. I would just cut it in fabric directly to to save time and just mark my measurements on the pattern. That was 5.5 length, sides, and then 6.25 center. And of course you can mark it on here and trace it, but it doesn't really help you center length, width, 5 5/8, and then 5.5 width. And that's it. All right, then the hem, we would have to add all of our seam allowances as well. And I think, yeah, oh, the gusset, sure, we can do, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to move the microphone over. Sorry, I hope you could catch that. Okay, all right, so the gusset, yes, we'll add the gusset now. So let's go ahead and mark that in. And we want to measure down. So this was kind of, I can see more or less where that gusset was because it was where it was really dipping a lot. So I want to mark it down maybe about 6. And this is up to you. It doesn't have to be the exact same as what you originally did on your patterns or on your garment. It doesn't have to be the same. So I'm going to shape it up however I want it. I'm going to do a double notch to indicate the back. And then I want to make sure I have that same exact measurement on the front. And I'm going to go from this more outer line here and cut it. Okay. All right, so then we're going to cut those apart. Oh, I forgot to mark my notch. Notches are so important on gussets because it's extremely confusing if you've never done a gusset before, if you don't notch it. And even if you have done a gusset before, it's so confusing. Okay. This is the same exact procedure as doing a gusset at the underarm seam. And you're just putting together the underarm seams, and then this seam would then be the armhole seam for the concept. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and cut this out. You can see we have curves in there, so we're going to be ignoring those curves. So a single notch always indicates the front of the pattern, a double notch always indicates the back. Okay. So you can see we're already adding quite a bit to our thigh there. And I need a fresh piece of paper. I can accommodate this. It's almost long enough. I'm just going to use my side here. Okay. All right, so we are going to fold this in half. That becomes the fold, that becomes our rise position. And we often have to kind of remember we're raising that a little bit because we no longer have the shape in there to play with. So what I often do when I have this gap here is I take a little bit off of each side. So I'm going to be tracing this on here. So I'm aligning these points. Maybe I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. Okay. So we're aligning those 2 points here. Then we're aligning these 2 points down here, even though I'm slightly off. It's okay. Can double check that inseam later and take a little bit off if we need to make sure that the inseam of the pants are the same. That's important. So I have a bit of a difference. So I'm going to mark this with pencil first, because I think my lines are going to get too confusing otherwise. And I'm going to mark my front, and it's okay that the front moved because I'm done with it. Okay, all right. All right, so then I'm going to measure the width here and take half of that amount off the front and half of it off the back if I want to achieve that original measurement. And generally I would do that, but since he was already a little bit small on the thigh, and I actually gave a little bit more to the lower thigh area, which was down here, I'm going to keep that on here. So my pattern piece then looks like this, and it's a big diamond. Oops. And when you're sewing the pattern together, you're making sure you're aligning those notches, because it's the sewing part that gets the most confusing to sew it together. And once you align the notches, you're good to go. And I would just if you have a notcher. Okay, and that's my pattern here. Are there some questions about that? Oops. All right, is anyone still there? I hope that the sound didn't totally go when I went back to the overhead. I'm really sorry about that. Okay. All right. Yeah, let me know if you have any other questions. I think that we went through all of the points for today, except seam allowances. So don't forget those seam allowances before you cut it out. Does anyone want to see seam allowances? I mean, I think this is pretty basic. If you want to see it, I can keep going because I'll do it anyways. But I'm really, really so glad to see everyone here and sticking through it with me. I really appreciate that. It's so much to see you all. Okay, there's a question from Cassandra. It's so great to see you, Cassandra. If you were to remove the extra space in the gusset pieces, what is the point of a gusset? Okay, so the point of the gusset is that we have no seam. Let me grab the pair of pants. So gussets do two things. They raise the rise just that little bit, which can add mobility and movement. And two, it eliminates the seam on the inseam. It's a diamond. It's a complete diamond shape, just like we did here. We have no more inseam. It's, let's see, you can see it. That's the shape. And that shape of that diamond then, because it has no inseam, it's often really preferred for things like sportswear. So often with tights or leggings, anything that's really functional, it will have a gusset because there's no abrasion with that inseam going back and forth. As well, for people who have really big thighs, it's more preferred to have a gusset than it would be to have a seam right where those thighs are constantly rubbing and probably causing chafing and a lot of discomfort. So it can reduce the chafing because there's no inseam directly where the abrasion occurs, and it can help with the movement and the functional sports clothing as well. But you'll see it in regular lifestyle clothing. It's not only in sportswear, it's really across the board, and oftentimes it's a design feature as well. It's up to the designer if they want it. But it is very functional, and I would highly recommend it if you have any sort of chafing in that area. So yeah. All right, can a gusset work on the shoulders? So if you have what's a gusset on the shoulders, it would be more like a yoke. So it's just a different term. It's the same exact concept as we did the yoke for the pants, but it would be on the back of the shoulders. So if we think of like a button-down shirt that has a seam across the back shoulders, that would be considered a yoke. And that yoke can move all the way to the front, and you can have a design line in the front. It would have no shoulder seam then. So it's similar concept, it's just called something different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cheryl, you said I'm willing to see anything you want to demonstrate. Oh, Cheryl, I love all of my students. You guys you're making me blush. Okay, the grain line on the gusset. Oh, that's a good question. So this, the grain line on the gusset, this can go two ways. It can go in the length, which the length of the gusset, we have our back leg and our front leg. It could go in the length or it could go in the width. It can go either direction. And really, for me, I prefer having the greatest amount of stretch in this direction. So my grain line would generally go this way because, well, it depends on the fabric. So, okay, let's think. Most fabrics stretch most in the width, which would then be grain line this way. So I had it reversed in my head. So the grain line would go this way if the fabric is stretching in the width. If the fabric is stretching in the length, it would go this way, like the fabric lengthwise from selvage to selvage here. So you want it, I like to have it in the width. I always like to have the greatest stretch of my fabric in the width of the fabric. And that's really for comfort, because the more you move, the more areas you tend to move is in the circumference, not as much in the length. The exception would be something like cycling shorts or something that you really need a lot of stretch in the length because your backside is stretching a lot when you're sitting and your knees are stretching a lot when they're sitting. So in something like that, there could be an exception, but generally you have a four-way stretch anyways, so it should have a fair amount of stretch both all four directions. So yeah, so this would be the grain line preferred generally. All right, okay, let me go ahead and continue with seam allowances. If you want to stay, you can. If not, I really appreciate you joining. Thank you so much, and I'll keep going with seam allowances because I have to do it anyways. So let's switch over to that overhead shot, and I'm just going to do it for kind of the bigger pieces here. Okay. All right, my favorite tool for seam allowances is the clear ruler. There are a lot of other hacks people like to do, like taping pencils together. If you tape two pencils together, you can get kind of the right width and go like that all the way down if your width is right. But I like the kind of old school way of doing this. So I'm going to add 3/8 of an inch, which is 1 centimeter. That's my preferred measurement. And really, I should be doing measurement checks before I do this step, but I think I'm pretty good since I did a couple checks earlier. And then for the bottom, I would for sure be adding a double fold at the bottom. And whenever I do folds, always, whenever I do any hems, I'm always considering the length. Oh, is that right? Yeah. The length times, so 1, and then I'm going to do another amount for that, 3/4 of an inch, so 2 centimeters. And then I'm always actually folding those up when I'm doing those seam allowances and cutting them. So, because if you were to have a really flared pant or something like this, then you would get a different shape here if it's flaring out on the pant. So anytime we're doing folds, if it's not super straight, then we fold it before we cut it, or we use a tracing wheel. So for that example, I'm going to actually cut it on the lowest line. And we always want to think of the direction that seam allowance is going when we're doing seam allowance, because the direction it's going is actually going to change the amount that's here. So you can see if I look at my original amount here, it's slightly smaller over here, and it's slightly bigger over here because I have a slight angle to that bottom hem. So when I'm cutting it off, I want to make sure that that's totally straight and aligning, and I've taken just a hair off, and I'm going to add just a hair over here to align it to that original line here. So when I open it up, I often get like an accordion effect there, and that definitely helps to make sure that when you're folding, double folding it, you're not getting any twisting in it. Then we'll continue. We should really add those seam allowances here. I should really double check that front to back inseam again, because I had a slight difference on the gusset. So this is called walking the pattern, and it's kind of a quicker way to do it than measuring both pattern pieces. And I can see that actually I'm quite good, so it's okay. Probably just because I'm using markers. And yeah. And whenever I'm using tape, I always really love the matte tape, because you can use pencil on it. If you use the shiny tape, it doesn't work with pencil. Okay. And we just kind of continue on. Now when I do mark my gusset here, I am going to make those notches very prominent. So I'm sure to do that, and then I would also extend this notch out here. And I would also write a reference gusset here, just so I know. I was going to double check my grain line in the front, or in the back. Let's see. I like the L square for this, to just double check and see how it's lining up with the bottom hem. Okay, that looks really good. If it's slightly different, we can straighten it up a little bit here, looks like. Yeah, that's looking good though. Usually it should align to either the front or the back, whichever is less angled at the hem. And that's looking really close to the original one. Slightly off from here, but then I'll just double check that on the front. I would probably copy the back to the front then, if it's looking better. Okay, so then any other notches that you might need. So things like the knee can be a really nice thing to know where that knee is. The measurement down for the knee, it tends to be around 16 inches, 14 to 16 inches, which in centimeters. That's 35 to 38 centimeters, or even up to 13 as well. So it really depends on the person and exactly where you want to measure on the knee. I'll mark it for 14 here just to have a reference. And you could take that over to the other side as well, aligning the grain line to that. Other things like the hip would be a good notch to have, and any other notches that you want to line up. So I need to do my seam allowance at the top. Okay, squaring. Oh, actually, so my newest line was this one. Okay. All right, there's. Okay, Cassandra, thanks for sticking on. I'll see you in the next one. All right, let's see. Okay, all right, so I think that's pretty much the same concept. I think people get it and probably are tired, so we'll stop for today, and just wanted to, say thank you so much for joining. And I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you. Wonderful to see you all, and really, really great questions. I always love your participation. It's so much fun to be here with you and enjoy the weekend together, having a wonderful sewing party. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Carla. Wonderful. So great to see you. And Dennis, oh, so nice. Edwards, love you. Thanks so much. Love you guys. Oh, you guys are so nice. Wow, you guys are really sticking on. I didn't know there were that many people still here. Yolanda, Jackie, Tracy. Oh, you guys are amazing. Thank you. Ilova. Oh, thanks. And Lara, wonderful to see you guys all. Thank you. Love you so much. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend. And I hope you have wonderful sewing days ahead. Lots of pattern making fun. Okay. Wow, lots of you. Okay. Bye.